Hello and welcome to Seaside High School. This is American Government, Chapter 2, Section 3, the Critical Period. As we look at that time in history in the United States prior to being the United States, but yet still not part of the British government as the colonists have won the Revolutionary War. It is now that period of time between 1781 and 1787, and we look at what the colonists did with their government and what they were trying to accomplish. And just a reminder that our objectives for this section and the preceding sections are all posted on the wall in blue paper. So as you check those objectives as we go through, if you understand what it's talking about, can answer that objective, then you have met the minimum requirement for this section. Okay, here we go. The critical period. Number one was what were the Articles of Confederation. Hopefully the term Confederation is ringing a bell, as we've talked about that as a loose league of friendship. So we're going to look at what the Articles of Confederation were. Why were the 1780s a critical period in United States history? And what did America do to create a stronger government in the 1780s? So this is the first time that we've seen those words, stronger government, or creating a stronger government, as the colonists and the new states really worked hard to create a representative government that was very, very limited. And so we're going to look at what changes had to come about to make something maybe a little bit stronger. Okay, so the Articles of Confederation, they're established that league of friendship among the states. Again, there's no binding contracts between the states. So if the state of Maryland or the state of Virginia wanted to leave the Confederation, or this alliance of states, they could do so very freely. There was just a sense that the states knew that if they were unified, and what they had learned through the previous 100 years, that if they unified on things, they were much, much stronger, and other forces around the world would take them more seriously if they worked together. So what are some of the powers that the Articles of Confederation had? Well, they had a Congress. It was equal representation, which means every state sent the same number of representatives, and it was one per state. It did not matter the population of the state or the geographical size of the state. Every state got one representative to this Congress, and they would use that Congress to do things like declare war. They could deal with national issues based on finance. They could settle disputes among states, but again, it was the Congress making those decisions to settle those disputes. The obligations, the states basically promised to obey whatever the Congress said and to respect the laws of other states, and all of those powers, what in the future we will call inherent powers and reserved powers and express powers, were all held by the states. So what we want to look at here is the 13 states held on to sovereignty. Their sovereign powers were theirs under this Articles of Confederation. They were not giving up much in order to be part of this group. And what we saw during this period of time is states agreed to follow what this Articles of Confederation national government said early on. But if it didn't benefit your state, then there was a less likelihood that you were going to follow this procedure or this process. So you start to see where states within the Confederation are allying with each other to vote on certain things which maybe detract from the opportunities in other states, which starts to create some political infighting or economic instability. And with a new country, it really needs to be financially stable if it's going to succeed in the world. So over time, and we're not talking about a very long time, because the Articles of Confederation come into place in the mid to early 1780s, and by 1785 they're already starting to see some things that don't work well, and we have those listed here on the screen. So again, one vote for each state, regardless of size. Congress was powerless to lay or collect taxes. What lay means to set the tax rate, and they couldn't collect any taxes. Duties is the same as a tax. It's just a different name on a different type of scenario. Congress was powerless to regulate foreign trade and interstate commerce. So any type of relationship with another nation or trade within the states. So if Maryland was trading with Virginia and you had to go through the state of Pennsylvania to get there, there was no way to regulate what was going on. So things were different in different states. It had no executive branch, so it couldn't enforce any of the acts of Congress. Yes, the states agreed to follow those, but again, it would be kind of like, you know, your parents telling you that you had to be home at 10 o'clock on Saturday night. And if you came in at 10:30 and they didn't say anything, the next time when you come home, it'll probably be 10:45. And if they don't say anything, you would continue to push that envelope until you found out where the boundary was. If there's nothing to hold the states accountable, they slowly began to just do what was in their best interest and not what was in the best interest of the entire Confederation. There was not a national court system. So yes, Congress itself could settle disputes between states, but then you started to get into basically the legislative branch performing a judicial duty, but being part of that political process so that Congress is subject to how the constituents or voters felt about the situation. Whereas if it was a true judicial branch, then they're removed from that political pressure and they can make a more unbiased judgment. There was also the amendment could only occur with all 13 states. You could not you couldn't have 12. So if one state didn't want to participate, they could not change the Articles of Confederation to amend them. That's very, very difficult to get all 13 at the table to talk. That you had to have 9 out of 13 majority to require laws to be passed. That's called a supermajority, because obviously 7 would be a majority, so you're looking at a little bit more than just a majority to pass any laws. And again, the Articles is just really a league of friendship. So what we want to look at this point is the Articles of Confederation set up by the 13 states was designed to be very, very weak as a form of government. This makes a lot of sense because the states came from the rule of Great Britain, where the power was at the national level, and they had power over the states. And so the states wanted to have this sense of being free. It's like when you graduate from high school and you move on, and you guys are going to experience this here in about 7 or 8 months, and you're going to have that total sovereignty, that total freedom. There's all kinds of great things that come with that. But at the same time, you kind of don't know what you have until it's gone. And the states started to realize that if they don't have some type of cohesive government to keep order, to have some laws that everyone's going to live by, then it was a little bit chaotic and it wasn't a good style of living. They didn't want a real strong central government, but they also found out that the really weak central government they created was just too weak. All right, get out your A, B, C, D cards. We'll do a formative assessment. Okay, here we go. The government set up by the Articles of Confederation had. So what did this government have? Remember, you're going to wait till I say the word respond before you show your answer. A, no legislative or judicial branch. B, only a legislative and executive branch. Only a legislative branch consisting of a unicameral Congress. Only a legislative branch consisting of a bicameral Congress. Now, this might be the first time that we've seen the word unicameral. Unicameral is a cameral is a house of where Congress would meet or representatives would meet. So a unicameral is one house, and a bicameral, bi being the root word for two. Cameral House, so bicameral is a two-house Congress. So, question, is it A, B, C, or D? Go ahead and respond. And our guest teacher will check through and see where we're at. Again, if we're not understanding this particular question, let's go ahead and stop the presentation, and you can revisit that information again as a group and then pick back up as we move on. The correct answer here is C, only a legislative branch consisting of a unicameral Congress. They had one representative from each of the 13 states. So there was a call for stronger government. Representatives from Maryland and Virginia met at Mount Vernon. Mount Vernon is known most famously for being George Washington's home. And in 1785, they came to discuss the trade issues. One of the things that was causing a real problem is that every state had its own currency. So Maryland had a currency, Virginia had a currency, New York had a currency. So if they're all dealing with their own type of money, it's not the same. But yet trade between all of these states was happening. That meant the money had to exchange. And it would be very much like us working with Canada and Mexico, but on a more regular basis, trading regularly, understanding that the currency, a dollar in Mexico and a dollar in Canada and a dollar in the United States do not carry the same value. So dealing with those exchange rates made it difficult for the states to work with each other. So that became one of the issues with trade and just the fairness of who was trading with who and who could trade with other nations around the world, who had access to ports. It wasn't all working out the way they originally thought, and the idea of having a weak central government to kind of guide all the states and let them do what they wanted to created too much competitiveness between the states, and they weren't working well under this lack of strength by a federal government. So the meeting was so successful that the Virginia General Assembly, so that would be the people who came from Virginia at this Articles of Confederation, said, hey, let's have all 13 states meet. And they met in Philadelphia, and this ultimately becomes the Constitutional Convention. There were 55 delegates that come to this Philadelphia Convention to talk about how do we restructure the government to make it stronger. And this group of people is also known as the Framers. Just like you have individuals who build homes that frame up a house, they're called the Framers. These gentlemen put together ultimately the Constitution, which we'll talk about in a little bit, are called the Framers of the Constitution. Now, let's get out our ABCD cards, and we'll have a couple quick formative assessment questions. Number one, the government set up by the Articles of Confederation had A, the power to make treaties and build a navy, B, a bicameral Congress, C, separation of powers, or D, a president to carry out its laws. And respond. I think this one's probably a little tougher. We know that it did not have a bicameral Congress, it didn't have separation of powers because it didn't have an executive branch, and it didn't have a president. So that leaves us with the power to make treaties and build a navy. That the Articles of Confederation had the ability to work with other nations to set up a treaty, as all nations have that power. Number two, which of the following was a weakness of the Articles of Confederation? So we listed off about 9 things earlier, and let's see. A, Congress could not make treaties. B, Congress could not borrow money. C, the state did not agree to obey the Articles. Or D, Congress could not lay or collect taxes or duties. And if you remember, go ahead and show me your answer. Okay, hopefully everybody picked D's, because as you remember, Congress could not lay or collect duties or taxes was one of the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. Okay, great. This concludes Chapter 2, Section 3. And I hope that you were able to derive some information from this. Don't forget you can use your book to help you fill in some of the gaps, as that reading is extremely important. And we will talk next when we discuss Section